Everyone knows Loki, the shape-shifting trickster god who always stirs up trouble wherever he goes. But the kind of chaos caused by Loki's children is completely different. You see, these children are pretty mysterious and very monstrous. This is everything you need to know about the neglected children of Loki. Loki has 4 well-known children: Hel, Fenrir, Jormungandr, and Vali. But not many people know about Narfi or Nari. Now Loki married the goddess Sinjin, and they had Narfi. Poor Narfi got caught up in some serious drama. You see, Loki's hand in the death of Balder ended up bringing punishment on his son. Odin's son Vali was born solely to avenge Balder's death and punish Loki. Vali goes ahead and kills Narfi, then uses his entrails to bind Loki. Yikes! There's not much else to say about Narfi. He kinda just exists to suffer for his father's sins. Some translations even say that Vali himself might have been Loki's son, and he transformed into a wolf to take down Narfi, but many historians say that this is an error. Now on to Loki's other children. Despite being married to Sinjin, Loki had some other kids with a giantess and even a horse. These 3 monstrous children, Hel, Fenrir, and Jormungandr, were raised in Jotunheim, away from the other gods. When the gods finally found out about them, it was bad news. They were prophesied to bring disaster wherever they went. Odin, not one to mess around with prophecies, decided to take action. He ordered the children to be brought before him. Hel got sent to Niflheim, where she became the ruler of the underworld. Fenrir stayed in Asgard, but the gods kept a close eye on him. And Jormungandr? He was tossed into the sea, becoming the mighty world serpent. So, yeah, it looks like Loki's kids were destined for trouble from the start. Just take a look at the story of Loki's daughter, Hel. Among Loki's 3 children, she was the one with the most serious job, ruling over Niflheim. Odin even gave her authority over 9 worlds. As you might expect from an underworld deity, Hel has this gloomy vibe going on. Her face is said to be split between blue and flesh-colored. Some historians even call her the half-goddess. Now, Hel lives in these huge mansions with a bunch of servants, including her trusty hound, Garmr. But despite her importance, when Hel showed up in stories, it's usually just in passing, so we don't get much of a sense of her personality, except that she seems pretty indifferent to both the living and the dead. One of the biggest stories she's involved in is about the death of Balder. After Balder bites the dust, Hermod, his bro, heads to Hel to try and bring him back. Hel says she'll let Balder go if everyone in the universe sheds a tear for him, both the living and the dead. So the gods go on this tear-shedding mission across the cosmos. But there's this giantess named Thok, who refuses to cry, messing everything up. And because of that, Hel decides Balder's love wasn't genuine and keeps him in the underworld. Then there's this wild battle between the gods and some forces, where Loki rolls up with all of Hel's souls. So even if Hel herself didn't join the fight, she let her dad borrow the souls of the departed, which led to some serious trouble, just like the prophecy said. Now, let's see how the giant wolf Fenrir fulfilled this prophecy. So when the gods separated Loki's kids, Fenrir was the only one they took back to Asgard. As he grew, he did so at an alarming rate, which freaked the gods out. Even though he didn't show any evil traits, there was always the threat of him potentially fulfilling a prophecy about him causing trouble, like killing Odin and his sons Skoll and Hati, swallowing the sun and the moon. To avoid catastrophe, the gods decided to restrain Fenrir. They tested different chains, tricking Fenrir into thinking it was just a strength test. Each time he broke free, They praised his strength, but inside, they got more anxious. Finally, Odin reached out to the dwarves for help. The dwarves crafted Sleipnir, a binding made from 6 mystical ingredients, including a soft silk ribbon that was way stronger than it looked. When Fenrir saw the ribbon, he got suspicious. He knew it must be some kind of trick. But the gods assured him that if he couldn't break it, they'd let him go. Fenrir agreed to be bound, but he had a condition. He wanted one of the gods to put their hand in his mouth as a sign of trust. Everyone hesitated, because they knew they'd lose their hand if Fenrir decided to chomp down. But Tyr, brave as ever, stepped up and offered his right hand. Once Fenrir was tied up tight with the ribbon, he struggled but couldn't break free. The gods cheered, except for Tyr. Feeling betrayed, Fenrir clamped his jaws shut, taking Tyr's hand with him. To keep Fenrir from causing more trouble, the gods anchored him to a stone slab and stuck a sword in his mouth, holding it open. He howled in pain, but nobody answered. He stayed there, bound, until Ragnarok, the end of the world. During Ragnarok, Fenrir's sons caused chaos, and when Fenrir himself joined the battle, even the brave warriors from Valhalla seemed outnumbered. Fenrir found Odin and killed him, but Odin's son, Vidar, avenged his father. He shoved his foot in Fenrir's lower jaw, held the upper one with his hand, and tore the wolf's jaw apart, finally ending Fenrir's reign of terror. But Fenrir is not the only monstrous child of Loki. Let's talk about Jormungandr, the world serpent. It's said to be so huge it could wrap around the whole world and still touch its tail. Yep, that's Jormungandr, also known as the Midgard serpent, because it was tossed into the ocean that encircles Midgard, our realm. Now, Jormungandr has some serious beef with Thor, and it all plays out during Ragnarok. But before that, there are a couple of interesting run-ins. One time, Thor goes fishing with a giant named Hymir. Thor wants a bigger catch, so he casts his line into the deepest waters. But instead of a fish, he hooks Jormungandr. Thor's all set to whack it with his hammer, but Hymir's freaking out because he knows it's a sign of Ragnarok. So Hymir cuts the line, and the serpent swims away. But the real rivalry between Thor and Jormungandr starts earlier in a story involving a giant king named Utgard Loki. Thor and his crew face some challenges, including lifting a giant cat. Turns out, that cat was Jormungandr in disguise. Thor almost lifts it entirely, but one paw stays on the ground, so he fails the challenge. Later, Utgard Loki tells Thor that he has seen the world serpent. Thor takes it as a personal insult and becomes determined to take down Jormungandr. Fast forward to Ragnarok, and it's go time. Jormungandr emerges from the ocean, spewing poison and wreaking havoc. Thor faces off against the serpent and manages to kill it, but not without consequences. Yeah, Jormungandr's poison takes Thor down too. That's not all of Loki's children. Let's wrap things up with Sleipnir, the 8-legged horse. Strange, right? But the strangeness doesn't end with the number of legs. It's more about how Sleipnir came into the world. So Loki transformed into a mare and hooked up with this stallion named Svadilfari. And here's the thing. The gods needed a wall built to keep out invaders. They hired this builder who demanded Freya, the sun, and the moon as payment. This was agreed upon, only if some impossible deadlines were met. Now, the builder was only supposed to use his stallion, Svadilfari, to haul the massive stones needed for the wall. But this builder was a speedy worker, almost too fast, the gods got worried he'd finish ahead of schedule and demand the payment. With just 3 days left, the gods blamed Loki for the mess. They said either he stop the builder or face a gruesome fate. So, Loki did what he had to do. During the night, Loki, in mare form, lured away Svadilfari, leaving the builder struggling with the heavy stones. Then Loki mated with Svadilfari, giving birth to Sleipnir, the fastest horse ever, and Odin's trusty steed. Turns out the builder was a giant, and Thor dealt with him accordingly. And Loki, having done his part, was forgiven by the gods. Now Loki's kids might seem monstrous, but maybe they turned out that way because of how they were treated by Odin. Like a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, but hey, we'll never know for sure. And if you like knowing more about epic myths, click on this next video to find out more about the avatars of Vishnu.